something. I forget what it is. Hey everyone, how's it going? It is I, the real Randy Chavez. I'm coming at you today with a very special podcast with my good friend Greg Schultz. Everyone say hello to Dashi. Hello, Dashi. And it has been, I think the last time I had with interviews a few years ago now. I think it was like I have 22.
2020. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. 2 years ago.
Yeah.
All has changed.
It has. At that time, the Russia invasion of Ukraine was very fresh, and hopefully that gets to come to a end soon. I think at that time, your son was still just a toddler, and we had still had.
He's reading books. Last night before bed, he wants to make a dragon deck for Pokemon. So we were going through and now he's at this, he's 6.5 in first grade, and now he's like reading. It's like ways to trick your 6-year-old to like practice reading is like, hey, what does this Pokemon, character say? And he'll read it all and stuff. So yes.
I love that. So obviously
I was a Magic the Gathering kid, and so I still have my 3rd edition revised complete set. So he'll like wanna, he'll like ask to see it, and I'll be like, okay, careful on those dual land pages as he flips through them. So it's been fun for me to like learn Pokemon. I know much more, and my wife, even to her own dismay, knows more about Pokemon than she ever wanted to know. Anyways, sorry to sidetrack.
No, that's great. I love that the new it's like Gilmore Girls, where every year like this new generation of people gets introduced, and that's so cool to me to see, because that's a sign that your stuff is going to last for forever, as long as the new people come in.
And I haven't really collected, I when I was like in middle school and like high school, I collected like the Magic the Gathering set. And it was I'm super happy I like have the entire 3rd edition set. But now knowing my kid likes Pokemon, I've actually bought some like PSA 10s on like some of the tag team ones, just because. Okay,
so the newer ones.
Yeah. And yes, I am not at the that level yet financially. But it's like, it's amazing to tell, like, if it was big when I was a kid and it's big when my kid's a kid, it tells me like this has staying power. And now all these kids who are my kids' age, they're going to be 20, 30, 40 and be like, I used to play Pokemon, with my dad and my friends. They'll want to collect those cards. And so anyways, I think they'll be cool, maybe wedding gift. Be like, hey, remember when I bought these PSA 10s?
Oh, heck yeah.
30 years from now.
I would love it if that, maybe, I don't know if you remember, you ever see Friends back in the day?
Yeah.
And I think Ross's parents told everyone that him and Rachel, because they had a baby, that they were married because they didn't want to know that people to know they had a kid out of wedlock. And then everyone kept handing Ross checks the whole night. And he's like, well, it's the easiest $700 I ever made, which 30 years ago was a lot. But now, I could picture people getting Pokemon cards as wedding gifts for both there. I would love that if I ever get married. Just letting you know.
Yeah. Okay.
There's Pokemon Days coming out in next week on the 27th. So they're having a new Dragonite anime. They're having a whole bunch of new. I think they're going to make a Pokemon Yellow remake, so he might be able to play the first game that was ever like introduced. That'll be great. I'll when I go visit you, I'll bring some Pokemon packs and stuff you can open. So it's been quite a while. The last time we were talking, at least online, President Biden was president. As I think a big thanks goes to you for that, because I'd like to think you had something to do with that as his campaign manager. And now there's this very different change that I've seen, where last time when Biden got elected, I remember on like January 20th, 2021, I had said, hey, I didn't vote for him, but I hope he does a really good job. I hope he's the best president ever. And there's a couple people that were my right-wing friends that was like, he's kind of middle left and it's not really going to matter too much. And, they were kind of fine with it. But nowadays I see two types of people that are on the left. And one is that just a general fear of like, hey, I think Trump's going to take away some of those rights for the LGBTQ plus community. while making the world at large just a worse place to live. And I think some of those concerns are fair. And then there's another part of the left that legit thinks that him and Elon are Nazis and that anyone that supports him is a Nazi sympathizer. And I just want them to hear from someone other than me that what can you say to make them feel a little bit better? And maybe there's not something that you can say to make them feel better.
Yeah. Well, first I would say is like the vast majority of Americans want like if they have kids, they want their kids to have an easier time than they had. And they want to be respected and they want to feel they have value in their community. If people had that, I think society would be in a really good spot. I think Democrats fall into the trap of like, well, here's like 35 pages of policies that like, let me tell you about. And Republicans, these are huge generalizations and not fair to generalize, but we have to for these conversations. And then, Republicans are like, okay, well, here's who's screwing you over. And so like, let's destroy them. And the answer for both parties is somewhat in the middle. I think voters made it clear that they're frustrated that they don't feel enough is getting done on their behalf. And what Democrats have done a poor job of doing is first acknowledging, like, we hear you. And one of the things like Bill Clinton did well way back in the 90s, and one of the things that Joe Biden has had historically done well was acknowledge like, hey, like, you just want to be able to like have dignity with your work, take care of your, aging parents, raise your kids, safe, safe environments. And they'd acknowledge that, and like you don't have, and acknowledge that security so many Americans felt is no longer there. But Democrats really, I think, in a large part, stopped acknowledging, like, actually, a lot of people are working really hard and aren't feeling secure. And so one of the things, and I hope I'm not taking this in the wrong direction that you're,
take whatever saying, direction.
But I just, I want Trump to be successful because it's good for all of us. I appreciate that Trump doesn't feel bound by some of the norms in Washington, D.C. This city it's run by elites of both parties. Like, let me pull you up the Senate Republicans and tell you everywhere they went to college, and Senate House Republicans and Senate, and we'll basically have Ivy Leagues and like a few other schools. Not enough Buckeyes there. And, and so it is kind of run by the elite. National championship Buckeyes. This country is run by the elite. And that would be okay if people felt that they were prioritizing the interests of like the average person. And I don't think voters think either party is doing that. What I do think voters say is, hey, Trump doesn't even pretend that he's all like high and mighty. He says what I feel. He acknowledges like what is the barrier for my family's happiness? Now, I think he misappropriates it to like all immigrants and all Democrats, but he acknowledges it. He gives a reason why they're not achieving the life they thought they could. And he does stuff. Now, I do worry about checks and balances. We are supposed to have 3 equal branches in our 247-year history or so. Those 3 branches are, there's never a time where they're all kind of equal weight. And that's just the way this country has kind of been evolving. And I think it's fair to say in a 21st century society, is the way our government functions responsive enough to meet demands of people? That's a super fair question to ask.
That's fair.
What I worry about is that we break everything, some of it in a way that shouldn't have been broken, and some of it in a process that shouldn't have been utilized. And it takes us a lot longer to just get back to like getting things done on behalf of people who literally just want to like have a shot. No. Sorry, that was a long rambling answer.
No, thank you. I guess my goal with that question was I remember when Obama got elected for a second term. The first term he was, I was in high school. Second term, I was in the military, and a lot of people that I was around, a lot of people that I'd worked with in the military, and just people I saw on Facebook, like, this country is going to turn into a socialist state. This country, adjective of how this country was going downhill, and everything was fine. And I kind of want my friends on the left to know that most likely, in my opinion, that things are probably going to be okay 5-10 years from now. And I just want to know if you had thought that same thing of like, this is what the country does. It went a little bit left for a little while.
What I will say, and I've had some conversations. I live here in Washington, D.C., and I have reminded some friends recently that over the decades, there are many pockets of this country who have felt that their president and their government is not looking out for them. No. And now there's a lot of people kind of in my socioeconomic status who now feel that. And that's not dismissing how they feel, but like I can take you to where I grew up in like Ohio and the Midwest after like NAFTA and globalization, and so show you, huge swaths of this country that feel left behind. Yeah. And so, there's always some discontent, and I think Trump has brought that discontent to a different section, and I'm not excusing it, but I think for those people who are very concerned about Trump, there have been other people that have been concerned about other presidents not looking out for them. Again, I would argue that Trump is different because of like breaking a lot to see really if we should be breaking it that way. But I do want to have faith in the federal system. State, local government controls your life much more. Yes. I do want to feel that Senate Republicans around Ukraine will get a little bit louder if they see the president give Russia maybe more leeway. So I want to believe that the slow-moving part of our government will also give us some flexibility that if we're getting some pieces wrong, we have a chance to fix it. So Agreed. I am still optimistic. It doesn't mean I'm not anxious and I'm not frustrated about some of the approaches and tactics. And like, you can't govern off spreadsheets. Like Excel doc, you can't just look at Excel and like it has the word transition, so I'm going to cut their funding. Like, there is waste, and we need to get rid of the waste. I want to believe there's actually a better way to do it. There is a better way to do it.
So that you mentioned Clinton before. One of the things that I think everyone, Democrats and Republicans, rallied around in the 90s was the fact that Clinton and Gore, they'd said, hey, we want to downsize the government and we want to do it. And like everyone was behind that. And now that, Elon Musk kind of taking up that mantle and, Trump kind of knighted into that position saying like, hey, we're going to change this spot of government, change it to Department of Government Efficiency. And you had that. There seems to be a lot of anti-Doge people. Like they might just be anti-billionaire, and that is what it is. And I know that what you said, like, hey, just because they have the word transition in it means that there is cutting funding. What would you cut? What do you think are some ways that are okay to do this in a way that it doesn't cripple people that need these funds?
Yeah. I think the arbitrary nature of it, and what Clinton did is they had this riff, and this is like bureaucracy speak, but like a reduction in federal force or something. And they spent like 6 months in the Clinton years and worked on a commission, which don't always get things done, but then they actually had a list of things to do, and then they reduced the federal government size. Yeah. And so I have no problem with like, first of all, I'm frustrated at Democrats who didn't say, hey, let's go through like all these things we're funding and make sure there's not just things that aren't smart to be investing in. So there is clearly billions of dollars to save. 100%, I 100% believe that. And if people want to go through and like sort on an Excel spreadsheet and say like, these are the ones we want to flag, I would love for them. And I have a lot of friends that work in the federal government, and these are like PhDs in like ecology and make sure like at interior that like we don't ruin our own like water supplies. And these are like, these are just good people trying to do good work. And I wish there would be a little bit more than like, it's on an Excel spreadsheet. These like 50 words we read, I'm going to push this delete and we're cutting the funding. That's like how it's happening now. I have no problem with it say, hey, here's 100 different fundings we're having at this department. Let's like spend a week, 2 weeks. Let's talk to people who are involved with it, who are receiving these funds. Like if at the end of the day, they come up with a list of 1,000 things and 600 get cut because they took a time to see the impact. And what's happening is like there's like hundreds of millions of dollars of food sitting in like containers, go feed hungry people around the world. And like a bunch of like plain state farmers have like relied on that income from feeding the world's hungry.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of people that are affected that we don't want to affect. There's also like, turns out that every dollar you invest in like the IRS, like you actually get like $5 back or whatever the number is. Like we are cutting things. I was talking to somebody who does partnerships with I was talking to somebody, a friend today, who is not yet fired, but probably will be just because they're firing tons of people. And this person leverages the private sector partnerships to help support some of what, I won't mention the agency, but the private sector partnerships to leverage what the federal government is doing. So literally this person leverages private sector dollars to match or 2-to-1 or 3-to-1. So literally this existence of her and her team are saving the government money.
Yeah.
But like no one's taking the time to say like, you know, is this actually saving money? You see this with like FAA, like people who like safeguard the nuclear stockpile. Like we're being a little bit quick on just cutting things. But no, I truly believe Democrats should have said we're going to save 25 billion. And my gut is within programming some staff, it's probably there. Yeah. It's just that the process is just not. It also, I think, is, and I don't think Musk has to call like these people at USAID, like they don't make a ton of money and they literally are trying to take care of the world's most vulnerable. And you could have not want our taxpayer dollars going to that. We can have an disagreement about that. But to like basically say they're all corrupt and send them to the wood chipper, it's just not good for like the sustainability of a bureaucratic system.
Yeah.
In the long haul. And I worry about who's going to want to work in the federal government for the next like 15 years.
That's true.
And like we need good people. And like, yeah, the government runs a bunch of like super old legacy systems because it's super hard to get government to spend money now to save money tomorrow. And so, yes, we need like super smart, like computer people coming in and like, we need that. But this is not the best way, in my opinion, to execute on that.
How would you do it? Would you create another system that kind of checks Doge and kind of like the fact checkers did a few years ago and be like, hey, this is all good, but this is the stuff that we have to put our foot down. You can't cut because it's actually saving the government and the people a lot of money.
And I don't really know, the way it feels like this is playing out, it's like literally they're pulling spreadsheets and like looking for keywords. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's more involved than that, but it doesn't seem like it is. I am fine if you come up with a list, but then it's actually go and talk to the people who run the program, the people who benefit from the program, the people who fund. And yes, Democrats are equally at fault. And I agree on like government. There certainly should be reduction in force. There certainly are things we shouldn't be funding. So both parties are saying both parties are at fault. I've said that and I'll say that again. No. And Democrats should have done more of this because then Trump wouldn't have had such mandate or perceived mandate to go ahead and do all this.
Agreed.
So make a list and then actually see like, okay, we think this is what this money does. And like and after actually reviewing it, the president and it's under their jurisdiction to like cut it.
That's true. So there's going back to what Biden had done even before, I think this was before Biden was in, Elon and Stephen Hawking had made like had written a paper saying that AI is coming. And this is, again, I think before Biden got in. And if you do not control it, it will control you, talking about AI. And I think Biden listened, and he might have listened a little too hard. And he put it out like 100-page document of regulatory stuff saying like, hey, this is what you can and can't do. And I think that was a fair step. He might have, I think, overdone it, because what happened was that even though America and Biden wanted America to be good and not be the downfall potentially of humanity by enriching AI, China did not listen to that. And China they came out with DeepSeek. What would be your middle ground or your solution, regardless of where it is, to having regulations around AI, but also making it so that America can be first in the AI race as opposed to other countries?
Yeah, and it's hard being the country that globally doesn't cheat at the level of China and other places, but China, and the amount of intellectual property theft. They cheat. They cheat the
Seen that in the
system.
military, yeah.
Yeah, they cheat the system. They steal our technology. They do all of that. I worry a little bit about our like departure from Europe that we've seen in the last couple of weeks, because they we can be frustrated at like
as far as what? As far as the Ukraine deal, or
yeah, I mean, I think, you know, Russia has invaded a European country, and I think Russia or other European countries are probably a little bit concerned about our current posture there. So I think, you know, in a world of more enemies, you need more friends.
Yeah.
I would also say one of the things that made that executive order you're referencing good is I really feel on that issue in particular, the administration really engaged the industry. And one thing that I found is like Democrats don't really talk to the private sector enough, and Republicans only talk to the private sector. And again, like they both to blame. But that is one where you have to have consistent ties with the industry. And you know they have an agenda, and that's okay as long as you know who's, you know, what their agenda, why they have an agenda. I want people that have an agenda, like put effort into things. So I want people to have an agenda. I just don't want their agenda to trump, no pun intended, like trump my agenda if I'm like the federal government. So I think that consistent dialogue and engagement. I also think, and this is where I get worried a little bit about the culture we're setting about federal service, is like around the blockchain. Like they're even on the Hill, even these members, and a lot of the Republicans who like support blockchain, they don't understand it. They support it because they think they're supposed to support it. And I think it's hard to recruit into government people who can make $600,000 with stock options at Silicon Valley, and you pay them $180,000, and then someone comes around and says, "I can't believe they make this much money." So I do think, like, how do we create a federal government where we can bring experts in and make it, you know, and like for like sabbatical, like you go make a ton of money in Silicon Valley or doing OpenAI, and then you take a reduced salary, but like your public service is like a 2-year sabbatical with the federal government helping advise the policy. And I would want to see more of that, especially around emerging technologies, because the government's just like always a little bit, they're behind in terms of expertise.
Shout out to everyone in the comments. I'm sorry, I'm already like 20 minutes behind. We're only 23 minutes in. We'll try to get to some of those later. So we'll switch gears here a little bit, talking about Kash Patel, who was confirmed today by the Senate as FBI director. Do you worry about retaliatory investigations focused solely on Democrats, or do you think that, hey, he might be fair in his battle against corruption?
Voters want to see action, and voters aren't as partisan. Like voters are not as partisan as anybody in Washington, like for the most part. If you think there is legitimate corruption, you should go after it. What I worry about is like we have the bucket you investigate is this bucket that says like Democrat on it. We're like, let's see where there's corruption. I'd much rather say, where do we think there's corruption, and let like the facts take you where they may. So I do worry that it takes our eyes off of like, we have a bunch of like the rise of like white nationalism is a really problem. And Randy, you know about like ISIS and and extremists trying to convert like our military or people before they get into the military. I would much rather we spend time going after like the real enemies of the state who are truly enemies of the state. And again, I'm not saying don't investigate corruption where you think there is. Gosh, I just hate that. It makes it hard. And again, Democrats are just not as effective as Republicans. Democrats try to do this. They're just not as effective. I mean, Merrick Garland took like 3 years to do, you know, basically some of these investigations. And if you thought there was something there, move forward. Again, Democrats opposite of like, maybe there's something there. It takes 3 years and then nothing gets done. Where Republicans are like, something's probably there. Let's move forward in 3 weeks. Again, like, it'd be great if we just like actually work together and we take 7 months and we do a full job instead of too much or not enough.
I would love that. I think there's a couple of times where, and a lot of times I do lean to the right a little bit, but there's been a couple of times where there's been some grabbing some arms across the aisle and getting some bipartisan agreement. I think it might be Laken Riley, or it might have been, I forget which bill it was, where a lot of people were focusing on like the 40 something or 50 something Democrats that voted against the bill. I was like, no, I want to focus on all these Democrats that voted with the bill and voted with Republicans on this, because that clearly shows this bipartisan effort. That being said, there's something I want to ask you about. So Sarah McBride is a freshman congressman.
Yep, I know Sarah a little bit, not well, but I know Sarah.
Oh, cool. Okay, so as you know, she just became deputy whip, and according to my research, you can correct me if I'm wrong or not, I don't think any first-term freshman congressman has ever gotten that position before. And there's a lot of people on both sides that says like, okay, some people say that she got there just because of her merit, but a lot of people think that she got there just because she's transgender, and the Democrats want to really lean into championing equality and DEI. What do you think about it? Because especially because you know her a little bit.
Yeah, and so that role is, you've got to like twist arms and you've got to gain votes of Democrats. So the audience, like, I don't know what like Democratic member is like, oh, like she's here to whip votes and is transgender. Like it's just like, she worked for Biden, maybe as an intern years and years and years ago. So Biden, I think in the Senate office. Yeah. And then she had like a very kind of distinguished career in like Delaware politics. And she's like, if you noticed, when all the Republicans were going after this bathroom stuff, she was just like, I'm coming to Washington to like lower inflation and like, increase wages. So that she's a great example of like, who like, no one knows what a whip is. No one understands. Like, this is where sometimes both parties manufacture this outrage.
Yeah.
Like, her position is to like convince other Democrats to go along with like what the Democratic leadership in the House or House is trying to do.
Yeah.
And I think she does a very good job of just building relationships. And like, you can tell, if I'm Hakeem Jeffries, like you can tell she was getting attacked about which bathroom to use, and she was laser focused on like, I'm here for the economy, healthcare. And that's who I want as a whip, actually, is someone who actually is focused. And I would actually say she proved that she can remain focused while personally being attacked.
Okay.
And she's and that's a vote by her peers who say, we trust you to be like the person who tells us straight on like the bills that we should be like looking at, and like,
yeah.
So you can say it's for DEI, but I don't know to what end. Like who benefits, like, who benefits what? It just doesn't add up. It just like,
that'd be interesting. So I know she's super busy. I'd love to get her on the podcast. If you could connect us, that'd be great. That'd be cool to get her on.
Yeah. And now as a freshman, she's gonna be very busy. So you have to wait for some, recesses and stuff. She's gonna be very
freshman
busy.
A whip. She'll be busy for forever. Maybe when she retires, if she, unless she makes a career. I don't know. Am I Senator Palpatine in Star Wars Episode 1? Because we'll watch her career with great interest.
And I did also, my kid's old enough, so I did make the choice. We did 4, 5, and 6. It was like going back and forth. What order do you show it to him? And I just went with the order I saw him in, which I think he also claimed he actually kind of knew Leia was the. I don't want to ruin it. Spoilers. I assume everybody's seen.
It's like 40 years old. We could.
He kind of thought that like Leia might have been the sister, even in Empire Strikes Back. Nice. So, anyways, for the reference.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah, that's the way that I saw him as well. We saw 4, 5, 6, and they did this thing in the run in the 90s where they had them.
Yeah, they redid them. Yeah.
Yeah, and then obviously late 90s, you had Phantom Menace and all that. That's great. I love to hear that. I'm very curious though to see. He's only seen 4, 5, and 6, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious to see which ones his favorites are going to be, because like even though I saw 4, 5, and 6 in the 90s before the new ones came out, I really did like the prequels, and every adult that I talk to, they're like, no, you don't. You're just young and dumb, and you don't like the prequels. And even nowadays, like I still like them, and I'm at that age now where I don't like the new ones, and I'm curious to see if the newer, younger crowd, they like episode 7, 8, 9, and they think 1, 2, and 3 is kind of meh.
Yeah, I'll let you know as we work through them.
Thank you. That'd be great. Shout out to everyone in the comments. Says there should be an oversight. Yeah, dude, you should be an oversight committee.
There's an oversight committee.
You should be part of that. I feel like you're
well, you have to be a member of Congress, and I don't want to.
Don't want to do that just yet.
Anybody who wants to be a member of Congress right now, you think like,
yeah,
why would you want to do that? But
yeah, so there's a Lex Friedman post a couple weeks ago where he said, and you know who Lex Friedman is?
At first, I thought it was Superman's rival.
He's a podcaster that is. He interviews everyone, like everyone from all sides. He's about as middle of the road as he can. He's almost unbearingly naive, where he's like everyone should just love each other, and I love that about him. Got millions of followers, but he says that Snowden should be pardoned, and I know that on both sides of the aisle, like he's fairly hated in a lot of ways, partly because people on the right say that what he did endangered some of the troops in 2014, and part of the people on the left don't like him because he did all this and it made Obama look really bad. I was just curious, now that it's been like 10, 11 years since he had that, what are your thoughts on that? A lot of people call him a traitor.
Had he not run to Russia, I would possibly entertain something. But he ran to Russia, who has been working to subvert our democracy, and we could go back and forth on in what ways, but they are actively trying to subvert our democracy and have since like the revolution. I mean, for 100 years.
Yeah.
So once you go to like, if you go to the CCP or the Kremlin, like I'm already basically saying I don't trust. Yeah. And if you really thought what you're doing was in America's best interest, then stand here, face our justice system, and be a martyr. If that's what you feel, but he didn't. He fled. Sure. So at that point, you've shown me like your actions weren't. Well, yeah, that's where I stand.
Yeah, that self-preservation is really hard to tackle. Not a lot of people can overcome that. So speaking of not trusting, last time we spoke, you mentioned that one of the very few things that united Washington was Mark Zuckerberg. And he seems to want to paint the story of him like turning over this new leaf, and he was at the president's inauguration. What do you think his end game is? What do you think his agenda is?
Oh, I mean, it's, these tech guys, dudes, were the ones who were like, super smart and weird and picked on when they were little, and they want to be cool and they want to be accepted. And Donald Trump is like cool and powerful, and you want to sit at his lunch table, there is, I think, something, and I think people in politics and people that rise up to some of these levels, like you've got to sacrifice a lot, which I understand, but I think a lot of people are trying to fill some hole from growing up, or they were picked on or something, and like try to fill it in very unhealthy ways.
Yeah.
And to me, he'll kind of do what he needs to do to feel like included.
Yeah. Agreed. So there was a, has your kid shown any interest in like DC, like Batman, Superman, etc.?
We do Spidey and His Amazing Friends.
Yeah,
the now is like Spidey, and then they've got the Jedi show, like Young Jedi or whatever. And we did watch Skeleton Crew with him, which is how I got him into Star Wars. Like,
okay, cool.
We had to watch it in the daytime because I think it was a little like too much, like a little too scary, I think, for some of them. But he hasn't really done any DC comics.
Okay.
Yet.
Before I get into that, the Young Jedi show, like that takes place around like the prequels, and I'm so curious on how they're going to end that, because that ends with Anakin just massacring these younglings, and I'm curious how they're going to address that.
Yeah, and then Yoda's there. Like it's now. I do have to explain some timeline stuff for my kid. Now he's seeing Yoda die of old age. So. That's true. Anyway, the reason I brought that up is because there's a episode of Justice League Unlimited in like the 90s. They had Justice League, and then early 2000s they had Justice League Unlimited with all the characters. And Green Arrow, he said, I forget what episode it was or what the context was, but he says, I'm an old school lefty. I believe that government should be able to do what people can't do for themselves.
And there's this lot of people that are asking like, hey, I understand that sometimes like you have to try, and people need food stamps, and people need. Denzel Washington said in John Q, sometimes people need a little help, and I 100% agree that government should be able to do that, or someone should be able to do that, and maybe government steps up. But there's a lot of questions that people asking, like, dude, like, government is doing way too much. There's a lot of waste here, and there's a lot of like California with the fires and everything. Where do you draw that line? Where do you go in and say, like,
yeah, and these are legitimate conversations to have, and like, so I mean, again, this is where I can't control the Republican Party, and I can't really control the Democratic Party, but I've got influence is way overstating my influence in the party. But what I am more frustrated at Democrats now because of the conditions we allowed to give President Trump like the runway that he now has. Oh. So my whole thing is like, you have to clean, like, this is where I worry about Democrats. Like, we have to clean our own house or someone's gonna knock down our house. So like, I don't want to live in Portland. I don't want to live in Seattle. I don't want to live in San Francisco. I don't want and I don't want to run in these big Democratic cities. And so we've got a problem. It's like, we've got to govern well. And I don't know if Democrats can point to always governing well. And so for me, I want government. That's a great like line. I want government to do things that I on my own can't. And I want government needs I wish Democrats would champion like permitting and regulatory reform. We have too much regulations. Permitting takes too long. At federal level, state level, local government. There's just too much burdens on people to like reach their full potential. And I wish Democrats would say that. One of the things I'm trying to work on is kind of bringing back like the Teddy Rooseveltian style. And he was Republican, I realized at the time, but like pro-worker, pro-American, pro-capitalist, and like, that's the Democrat I want, is someone who like is unafraid of like the American flag and the Bible, and to be okay with that. And to also realize like the greatness of our country is our people, and not like our government. Well, it is our government because our government is of the people, but that's actually the cool part. And I think, so again, I'm not going to sit here and say like government's not big enough, or, Democrats pretend like the structures are working and we just need to do more. And Trump's like, no, these structures aren't working. And the reality is they're not working. They need to be updated. And Democrats didn't pay enough attention to that, which means Trump is just coming in and just doing what he's doing. Yeah. So this is this is somewhat self-inflicted by Democrats in terms of like, and I know I keep on saying people want to talk about this is what people want, the divisive stuff. And I'm sure it makes you feel good to like post that. And you're going to get me about some Guatemala stuff that you seem to know a lot about, whoever posted that. And I don't know exactly what that person's talking about, but like, I don't want to be involved with politics like of that. Yeah. Like, I don't know. This person can look it up, and I'm not going to I want people to reach their full potential. And sometimes like Pell Grants and clean water and infrastructure investments help that. The CHIPS Act, the bipartisan CHIPS Act, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, that's going to help that. And then sometimes it's a burden and needs to get out of the way. So I'm I guess a Teddy Roosevelt Democrat.
Was that him that put in the national parks directive?
Oh yeah. And he's the one the man in the arena and all of that.
Yeah. So that's the one. I forget who said it, that death had to come for him while he was sleeping, because if they came from while he was awake, he'd put up a fight. Yeah,
and he's kind of like it's okay to have some like Teddy Roosevelt was kind of Trumpy. They have some similar characteristics and personalities. And I don't think I'm a moderate, but I don't think moderates have to be weak. I think moderates can be bold, but like, I'm not going to like just get into divisiveness, because I just don't want my government and my family and my neighborhood to like reflect that. And so again, I'm not taking some of the bait that, some.
No, I understand. So to take this to a little bit of a weird place, which is, I think, my specialty, there have been many people, mostly in the Appalachian Mountains, but a lot of times on Indian reservations and everything, that they see some weird stuff. My friend Rod, who was driving through somewhere in like Arizona. It was through an Indian reservation and was low on gas. Truck driver, so he did this all the time. He stopped at a place to fill up, and there was a couple of like kind of like hood, like not good looking dudes rolling up behind him. And he's like, okay, I have a gun in my cab. If they really come up to me, I'm ready to do what's what. And then on the opposite side of the gas station, he heard what he thought was a lady screaming, and the two dudes that were like pulling up on him, pretending to get gas and maybe pretending to do some harm, they immediately got in their car and they just drove away. And there's some people that think that Roosevelt, when he put in this national parks directive, is that he thought, and maybe he knew, and maybe it's been suppressed, that there were some things in these national parks that were not public. And he made these national parks and park rangers and these services to like defend against that. Is there anything supernatural that you think the government is hiding from us?
So this is where like secrets are so hard. And again, for you, I know you well enough, Randy, like it doesn't feel like a curveball. And I feel it's totally appropriate segue to everything we've been talking about. Government, that's a super big secret to keep. And like, if you don't think like if Trump knew about it in the first term, he wouldn't have said something. Like I just like
there, yeah. Keep going.
Yeah, like I just that's a big secret to keep, and I don't think that. And it's so sensational. Like government can keep like secrets. Like there are national security secrets they are keeping. Like so, I'm not saying they're not capable of that, but like, yeah, we would know. We would know. But I do appreciate there being more transparent, like these like UFOs or whatever they call them now. Like I appreciate they're acknowledging like we don't know what these are. UFOs. Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that? Last year, Nancy Mace had talked to, and we can keep Nancy Mace out of it if you'd like, but the general attitude was like, hey, who's piloting these aircrafts? And this guy's like, well, they're non-human biologicals. I'm interpreting that as like they're beings that are probably carbon-based life forms that are piloting these, and they're not human. Aliens confirmed? I don't know. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, like I didn't see that interview or that statement, but like again, I just don't. Everybody has cell phones. Like everybody can record this stuff. I just don't think the government could keep that secret.
Fair point.
I think it's fair to say we don't know. And like, about space, like we're finding out like every couple of weeks, it's like, wait, that like anti-gravity is operating in a way we didn't think was possible. And it's like, I appreciate now that we admit like we don't know things.
Yeah.
So again, I just don't think government's capable of keeping a secret like that.
I agree. And I feel like people, like a lot of conspiracy theorists, like the government did this, the government did that. I was like, guys, I've worked for the government, and you're giving the government a lot of credit saying that they're able to do this stuff.
Well, and I know Democrats and people think there's this huge like network, and it's like Democrats aren't organized enough to like pull off some of these things. Yeah. You think, it's just it's and having been witness behind the scenes to a lot of things that end up in the media, it's like amazing how these stories turn out. I don't read any. I'm not saying there's fake news, but there's no news that covers DC that I don't take with like. It's like 70% accurate and 30%.
Oh, I'm positive that. Yeah, there's a ton of fake. I mean, there is a ton of fake news. I mean, on both sides, obviously. So to get a little silly with it, do you know who Mandatory Fun Day is?
No.
Or do you even know what? So, they're in the military. There's these things like where, oh, this is a volunteer position, but you have to do it. Like you're voluntold to do it. So. This guy called Mandatory Fun Day on TikTok is just like, he goes over a lot of like the hypocrisy and crazy stuff that goes on in the military. And it kind of brings to light in the comments some of the people that are a little special. Are veterans considered DEI because we're all a little different. We're all a little crazy.
And I think within the hiring practices of the government, veterans are actually a DEI. Like it actually is a like not protected class, but it is actually something that like you get like bonus points for being a veteran, as you should, by the way. Like you should.
I mean, yes. I mean, there's also we're a little. I got to send you a couple of things about the veterans that have served, and there are some like, I don't know if you should be handed a weapon. I don't know if you should be like. I mean, so obviously there are the people that they serve because they believe it's the best for the country. Some serve to get out of the house. There are some people that serve to like kill brown people in other countries, and it's like, oh, well, I'm glad you're on my side. But then there are some that just, obviously didn't have that any other opportunities. There was I don't know if it was a bill, I don't know if it was an executive order that transgenders are, I think, not allowed to sign up anymore. But if you're currently serving, they're fine. If you were in charge of the armed forces, what would you think the most important issue is to tackle? Would it be the border? Would it be the Coast Guard, like just guarding the coast? Would it be going into other places? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, what I will say, I appreciate, and again, I'm not going to bash Trump. Like, Democrats should have been stronger. And I think that
by all means, should have been whatever you bash. No, you want.
Democrats should have been more aggressive on the border, like the fentanyl, and going after some of these like cartels in a much more organized way. I am concerned about the radicalization of American citizens by foreign interests.
Yeah.
So that's kind of I'm concerned about the radicalization.
Okay.
I'm concerned about, China. Now, China has a lot of problems. Their rivers are all polluted. That one child policy has now like inverted their actually ability to support their current population. They've got a bunch of like single guys, which is like a dangerous cohort to have single, and then you building up your military. Like, so there are some kind of ticking time bombs that I worry about. And it's like, it's clear that it's now like these like ISIS pop-ups, what these different pieces around the Middle East that had been funded by Iran. It's not like these giant, outside of like China, it's not like there's going to be some giant like land invasion. Not that China's going to do a land invasion, but like the battles are all going to be kind of one-off piece. You worry about like cybersecurity and like, shutting down our like electrical grid and things that are like easier to do, and actually surprised it hasn't happened yet.
Agreed. I think a lot of it is just out innovation too. Like there was I forget what the unit is called. Basically what they did was anytime a piece or pieces of equipment was left during like a battle that they had to evacuate, there was this unit of the military saying like, hey, we can go in and we can reclaim all of this equipment, and then we can bring it back. But this way other people can't they can't reverse engineer it. But then it was decided that it was not worth the American lives to do that when we could just continuously out innovate, and then those units were disestablished. Ernie Mao says, hey, Greg, hope all is well. Let's get together soon at one of these events. Yeah, we totally should. We'll talk about blockchain in a second. We have a bunch of stuff that's going on here. I guess speaking of blockchain, is there it seems that right now Republicans are they kind of own like the pro crypto party.
Yeah.
How do Democrats go and reclaim that? Because that's probably going to be another one of the major things in the 2026 midterm elections. What's the strategy for Democrats?
And I've been talking to some of like a lot of the freshman Democrats that have just got elected are younger, and I think just more understanding of like technology. Democrats allowed, the like sensationalism of like speculation, consumers getting ripped off. And then this lie that Elizabeth Warren and others helped spread about Hamas funding from terrorism on like, terrorists are funded by bags of Benjamins and tankers of oil. Like that's actually, and I actually know some folks who formerly Secret Service who like will tell you like, I'd rather people do things on crypto because we can track it in a way that you actually can't track like a ghost chip.
Yeah.
I think that we need to bring the conversation back that blockchain is a technology that makes everything a couple percentage more efficient. And like we actually have to desensationalize it, because it's when sensational Democrats in particular, like, I don't trust this, like somebody's screwing somebody over, which happens. But we bring it back to like, this is a technology that just makes things more efficient. And like, this is like, at some point when like no one would say like Excel is like destroying this country, like the Excel, like no one does numbers and stuff not on Excel anymore. Yeah. There will be some point when no one does things not on like the blockchain around like financials. And I think it is, you know, I'm helping a company that's working to support like the open source software environment with a token that kind of incentivizes good actors to continue to support like the open source network. And like there are like real use cases. There's like, if you're trying to send money, if you've got family in Mexico and you're sending them money, like you can pay a fraction of like 0.1% on like digital asset, or you can pay like exorbitant fees, you know. So there are people who are underbanked. There are efficiencies in just money transfer, and because it's on a public ledger, it's like literally transparent. So I think it is getting back to this actually is a technology. Let's start there. Let's regulate it in a way that consumers are protected and we can more easily go after fraudsters. And then let's let Americans innovate. And like, don't let China and the rest of the world out innovate us on blockchain. So regulate it smartly. Again, not rocket scientists, but Democrats were too focused on like whatever Warren said on it. And the problem is like Sam Bankman-Fried and Elon Musk would, you know, this was years ago, would just tweet about Doge or Sam Bankman-Fried. And so that poisoned the well for Democrats. And so we're working to bring it back to like, let's just not be stupid. Like, let's not be like, this is a good technology. Let's make sure America owns the innovation. And I think there are, you know, some senators and a growing number of House Democrats, like Hakeem Jeffries, a lot of like, there's a good amount of House Democrats who understand this is like smart. And there is a small but growing number of Senate Democrats. And you, at the end of the day, like Republicans control a lot in this city. You still need 60 votes in the Senate. So you're going to need some moderate Democrats to agree with you on basically everything. So like I'm working in partly with this national security group, retired FBI, retired Secret Service, retired agency, and then former DOJ financial crimes guy. And like, we're working to like just educate Republicans and Democrats from a national security perspective. And these are people who like set up the first blockchain investigative unit at the Secret Service, who I'm working with and like getting plugged in. So kind of back to the facts of like desensationalize it.
That's so cool.
Now, of course, it's hard then when like the Trump coin and the Melania coin, because then it just, and I've talked to Republicans who are like, okay, the Trump thing was one thing, but the Melania coin, like, so it is hard because like other people don't want to desensationalize.
Yeah. There's a lot about, we'll get to that, and especially the blockchain. Good boy, there's a bunch of people that I served with that are on here. Shout out to you guys. It says, what do you think it's going to take to wake the Democratic Party up and start fighting back in much the same way Republicans have been fighting for their causes? And like, how do Democrats get elected in the midterms in 2024? Or I'm sorry, 2026.
Yeah. Very good question. I think the reality is there's a bunch of Democrats who run in like purple districts and talk about like the economy and healthcare. The problem is that the Democrats have the left wing of our party, which is very loud. We have organizations within the Democratic ecosystem which lean to the further left. Neither of those represent the Democratic primary voters, let alone the general election voters. And we have too many Ivy Leaguers in the Democratic Party that control too many things. Ivy League people.
Wait, why is that an issue? Because like you should want as many smart people as you want in your corner. Why is that an issue?
I want people that understand what, I hate the word real people, but I want people who understand. And I've got a lot of friends who went to Ivy Leagues, but if you grew up in like one of like 20 zip codes and went to like one of like 6 schools, like your worldview is different. Yeah. And I don't know, there's a lot of people who govern who have no idea, who've never met a person they're trying to govern for.
Oh, that's a good, okay.
So it's like, why don't you go and like sit in a cab with a truck driver for a while and like see if you're trying to like legislate this stuff and like, and not saying that other people that they don't do that, but there's just a lot of like well-meaning staff and people within like political organizations who just don't they don't know anybody who doesn't have a college degree.
Yeah.
And it turns out like most Americans don't have a college degree, and you don't need one. And for too long we said you needed one, and like so I think that's a big problem too. So it's you know, the Democrats have a donor problem because they're in a bubble, and we have structures that like think that the Democrats win by moving to the left, and that's 100% not the case. And I've ran a winning presidential in Ohio. I ran the Biden's Democratic presidential primary. Like I can tell you how to do it, but like the loud part of the party says it's like far left.
Yeah, there's a group of people. Jen is likely one of them. I remember being a very outlier in my class in high school, where everyone was going to college, and some of them knew that like, hey, I'm going to college for this, for X, Y, and Z, and a fair amount of them are successful. And a lot of people were really pushed by their guidance counselors, like, hey, you should go to college because you're not going to be anyone if you don't. There was stuff on the media. I think like Seventh Heaven, all of these college, this pro college movement was up there, costing people like 20, 30 grand a year. And now they're working in a field that they didn't graduate in. They're like 60 grand in debt. That was a big issue, and a lot of people feel like they were lied to. Right now, what is the best way to try to get people elected to some of these people? Do you guys want people that don't have a college education and to represent, because that might level the playing field?
Yeah, well, and this is where in the House in particular, like there's look at like the freshman class of like the new Democrats, and they come from like, again, I hate real life, but like they're not lawyers, they're not all like they come from like real people's jobs. The problem is the people who are in these safe seats and are there forever, their worldview is just different, and they kind of take over the brand of the party. And I'm not going to defend the brand of the Democratic Party. It's horrible, and a lot of it's warranted. So we have people who get it. My goal is, you know, can we, under the banner of kind of Teddy Roosevelt, like create an ecosystem where the incentive is for Democrats to remain true to who they are, and that's like people looking out for people who, you know, don't have powerful interests trying to help them.
So there's a comment here about Zuckerberg saying he wants to make the metaverse happen. I remember in 2022, we were in New York, and me, you, and Juan were in some random building, and there was like one of these games, like old school, like GameStop or whatever used to have, and you could go on and play. And I remember this being a computer game, so I started with the keys and jumping and all that, and I started playing. And he said, like, how did you know like what to do? How did you know what the controls were? And because I just came from that age, I was just like, oh, it's, you know, it's a game. All computer games are the same. You use these keys to move, spacebar to jump, and all that. Zuckerberg is spending like $25 billion on like the metaverse each year. What's your thoughts on the metaverse now? And now that the focus seems to be on AI and focus on like NFTs, just that type of technology as we get into the VV stuff.
Well, I think those that are frustrated at VV for the VV-verse, like look at the resources of Zuckerberg, and like that, you know, they're not out with it yet either. And I've not seen their betas or whatever. And I've seen a couple of VVs where it seems like, you know, VV is as close to it as Meta. So first I want to put some things into rationale. I think you're seeing more and more of these AR and V. I think the app, haven't tried those Apple Big Vision Pro ones.
They're pretty cool.
Great. But like you're seeing other ones that are smaller. And I think as like the AR and VR like goggles, or ones that are a little bit more like the Ray-Bans. Yeah. I think like what VV's working on is going to just fit like so well into like that ecosystem. So I do believe, I don't think we're at a real player one level.
Yeah, yet. No, but it won't be that for a while.
But I do think, you know, even just taking what Roblox has and like, you know, putting a headset on there, you're getting a little bit of like a metaverse type feel. So I am, this is why for VV, I just appreciate the ecosystem they're trying to build and the long-term view, and they're everything that they're trying to do. They're like one of the first ones up the hill to try it. As an example, that like Meta hasn't come out with their metaverse yet.
Yeah.
So like, I'm bullish on it, and I'm also patient. So I'm I understand things take time.
There was actually a leak today that happened, and it was like, hey, here's how you sign into the VVverse, and here's how you use in your VV credentials, and it looks cool. Like there's a couple of things, like I know they're trying to get it out in Q1, and so you've been an Omi homie for a while. You're into crypto. What would you like to see VV pull off in the next 6 months while this bull market is tearing? For both stuff, for the VV collectibles that you have, for the Omi that you have, what's something that you would like to see them pull off?
Yeah, I think there's still an opportunity. This isn't VV specific. I think Web3 is still very Web3, and like I as like I studied history and political science at Ohio State, and like I really like the VV, like the stamp, like the stamps.
Wait, the stamps, like
the presidential, like the presidential series stamps they keep coming out with on VV. Like,
yeah, those are great.
I think there is some low hanging fruit on getting, and the stamp collection is just so big. I think there's some steps to take to bridge Web 2 and Web 3, even though, I know VV doesn't call itself Web 3, but like, I think there are some low hanging fruit to build a broader awareness on like digital collectibles among people who already are collecting a physical copy, and so like I think that's something that would be exciting. I just like the comic book ecosystem they're building. Like you want like the things that are turning into like think of what are the successful tech things right now, and they're platforms, they're places people come. Roblox, Facebook, and like what I feel VV, and I know like people want to be able to take these like their stuff all over, that they want to take like their digital collectibles elsewhere. And again, I don't know any of the thinking around this, but I want people for now to keep everything in the ecosystem, because like I want it to be the platform and the exchange for this like market that we're not even scratching this surface on. So I want to continue to see investments in like the platform and people understanding like the digital collectible space and like just directing people into VV. And like, I just feel like the VVverse is like coming along, and like, and I know, Dan and David have done a great job, and it sounds like adding Ben has really added kind of like the next gear, which is like natural and like the progression of a company. And so it feels like all of that stuff is like in the work. So I just, again, I am patient. I'm not like, I'm fortunate. I'm how many figures into, I'm 100 million plus in Omi, and like, I've got a good amount of like collectibles, but I'm also like not in a rush to like, I actually worry if things like go too high too quick. I actually am in for the long haul.
Yeah. So no, agreed. And I feel like we're in that privileged position where I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but it's as things go lower and we can dollar cost average a little bit. I put out like a declaration the other day. It's like, guys, I want 1 billion Omi. And I know that I probably won't be able to get that unless Omi gets like cut in half, which is possible. But even if I just get up to like 500 million, get to like 500 million, that would be really cool. I'm at like 220-ish right now. There are other projects out there that are, I think will help VV. Like I remember a few Super Bowls ago, Ford put out an electric vehicle commercial, and the Google Analytics was like people were Googling Tesla vehicles, even though Ford had put out the commercial. And I think now that the likes of companies like Earth 2, of Chaos on the Chains, they're coming out with I'll talk about that a little bit more later. As the metaverse and digital collectibles get big, as long as people grow the hobby, people will come to VV eventually because of these 100-year-old companies like Marvel, Disney, Star Wars, etc. I think that'll help. Anyway, I know you have a bit of stuff on VV. What are some of the things that you have you collected anything recently? I know you like the president stuff.
I think that there was I think one of the last round of like basic whenever like they come out with more of the U.S. stamps, just because I just find it interesting and yeah. So those are I think the last couple. You know, I had stayed up to date with a lot of the Marvel Mighties for the many first, and I was fortunate, you know, having purchased stuff, you know, over the years, and yeah. So I think those are probably the stamps are probably
those are cool.
Most recent ones, yeah.
So they have something,
and I do have like a fair amount of the lightsabers, the Skywalker lightsabers. Those are just my like, because I just feel like at some point this VV verse, this was like 2 years ago, that these VV verse like is gonna be real, and I don't know exactly how this is all gonna work, but it feels like having like Skywalker's lightsaber, who is also Anakin's and all that. Like it just feels like that's a good. So I've got, I don't know, 75. I mean, it's like a lot.
Yeah, they should do VVverse in Q1, like in the next month. They should have that. They had a leak today about it. So they have this thing called the VV Comics Curator Program, where last year, within like a year ago, Marvel had said like every single Wednesday at 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, all of the comics that we're going to release on the physical comic book stores, local comic book stores that they open at 10, 11, you're going to get at 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it's not called Marvel Comics. It's called VV Comics. And VV has this thing called the Curator Program, where anyone that creates a comic is going to be able to put it on there. So right now I have this daCAT comic that I'm creating. I own the IP now. They voted that I get it, so I can get it on VV. When was the last time you had read a comic book, and what would you like to see in this kind of like dying breed? Because a lot of
so it's interesting. Is like, you know, when I was little, it was all like I reference my kid because that's, you know, a lot of my connection to like modern culture, I guess, right now, which I've never been, you know, I've never been like the pop culture person, even when I was like 15. It turns out like when I was little, it was all like Berenstain Bear books, like, and now every
I love that.
every like book for like a 6-year-old is a graphic novel. Like you go to the library and like,
wait, really?
It's all graphic novels.
No way.
It's all of it's graphic novels. So like, I don't know, like the physical, like, so my kid is getting used to like, you know, some of the first books he's reading, yes, Berenstain Bear and Dr. Seuss, but also like these graphic novels. There's this guy who actually is from Ohio. He's done like Dogman. I mean, there's all of these, and he's written, I don't know how many different like series. So like, and all my kids' first grade friends are reading these like graphic novels as well. So they're getting used to seeing like with the thought bubbles and like, okay. So it's actually not like, while the physical copies may be going away, there are 6, 7, 8-year-olds who have been reading graphic novels and are now getting turned into movies that like, I don't think we fully appreciate. So like my kid is like used to the comic book layout. Like he's probably with my wife right now as he's going to bed, is probably reading this like Ook and some like cavemen graphic novel thing. And like, they all have potty humor. So, you know, it's great for 6-year-olds. So I actually think that, and my kid also, like, you know, any screen he sees, he just assumes it's like a swipe screen. And it's like, no, dude, like that TV is not a swipe thing. And he'll be like, you know, when he has to like actually watch a show that has commercials, he's like, what are these?
Yeah, I hate those.
Yeah, it's like, what are these? It's like, dude, like we weren't able to like, you know, pause like Ada Twist and like just restart it whenever we wanted. Like when we missed a show, we never saw it again. Like, anyways, the whole point in this is like, the comic books aren't going away. And I think there's another generation that's going to be used to that format. And they're also used to swiping things. So I just feel like it's going to be supernatural, not your supernatural, but super natural to kind of adapt to like kind of a virtual comic book reading type thing.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And obviously from the Cat fam, they were messaging me before because you were in a Grumpy Cat space like years ago, and like, wait, I know this guy. They're pretty insane. So that'll be on there.
And the thing I appreciate about you is like you do a lot. I think do enough research to get people like me interested in like daCAT or DFX or like, you know, and then like, obviously people should always do their own research, but like it's also just helpful to have like someone like you like do a little bit of filter for those of us that don't necessarily have the expertise or time or bandwidth to like do some of that. So
yeah, it's strange because if you have like a normal most comics do not make new comics do not make money, because if you go to local comic book stores and let's say you go to Canada for the printing and everything costs you for 5,000 comics like $2,500 to print 5,000 of those. You have the comic book stores that will pay half of what they sell for at retail, so they'll give you $250 for the 5. They'll sell it for 5. You have the distributors and everything. If you're lucky, you break a little bit more than even, and you could do it from China where it's easier, but they ship overseas, and a lot of times the pages get the moisture in it and the product is dead. So it's hard if you're just starting. So the digital age is obviously better because you don't have to worry about any of that. You don't have to worry about printing and all that. Vivi's really helping with that. Bill Gardner's asking, you were at the Vivi party in 2022. Are you going to be at the party in New York this year?
When is
well, there's a couple of parties that they're doing. They're going to do one in London in May. They're going to do one in Portugal in Lisbon in June. They have San Diego in late July, and then they have New York in early October.
I'm actually going to New York next week. I do. It's a train ride away. So it is. This is one of the things that's like fun to be, and doing politics. And you can tell by some of the people tweeting some somewhat ridiculous things on the screen here. I'm pretty good at like just not looking at like the great opinions of people on Twitter. And so I appreciate like the parts of the VV community that are like supportive, and you can be critical. I'm all fine with critical and constructive. So no, I really like the times I've hung out with you and got, Dr. Profit and
Oh, we love him. Yeah.
The good team up there. And so,
yeah,
I hope to. It was fun.
Okay, good. I hope to get you there too, because there'll be a lot of stuff to celebrate this year. The market obviously goes in cycles. We love that stuff. Oh, excuse me. I'm getting a couple of comments in here because we're still like 15 minutes behind. People looking for America, USA goal. How long do I have you for? I feel like we've already.
I've got a 7 a.m. flight to Orange County tomorrow, but like maybe another 10 minutes. Does that work?
Okay. Let's do another 5 because I want to talk to you off camera for a bit.
Great.
As well.
Great.
All right, cool beans. So Germany is hosting some elections soon, and conservatives seem to be gaining a little bit of traction there. For years, if you were kind of like middle left in like America, you were considered like right in Europe. Do you think that this pendulum is swinging too far to the right, or do you think that sometimes this might be needed in Europe?
And I will barely claim to be an expert on American politics, and I think I'm more of an expert than most. And I won't claim to be one though, so I'm certainly not going to claim to be a European political expert. What I will say is the world had a appropriate reordering after World War II.
Okay.
The economy changed, women in the workforce, Bretton Woods set up, monetary fund, a lot of like infrastructure globally was set up after 2 world wars.
Yeah.
They have not received a major re-upping since like the late 40s.
Yeah.
We are due for the Democratic and Republican parties were due for like a reconfiguring of what makes up those parties. And I think the center left parties around the country or in the Western world have to come up with a better answer than, hey, what's working is mostly working, let's do more. Where the right is like, this isn't working, let's blow it up. Right. And so I think you're going to see people and like I am 100% a capitalist. We also have to understand like the free, like the open, like that there needs to be regulation, there needs to be some oversight, but not burdensome oversight. But Trump and the right are winning because they're saying you're getting screwed. And then I just don't appreciate like the solution to like fix who they say is screwing you and like their solution. But okay. No, I think like the right will continue to have success because they're tapping into a legitimate frustration. Now, at some point, are they going to be able to deliver on that? Like every time, people here tweet about transgendered or Trump talks about like going after Democrats, we're not spending time talking about how to like increase wages, increase housing supply so home prices and rent go down. So it's like all of life is like opportunity cost trade-offs. And like both parties are eventually going to have to solve problems or people are going to start throwing everybody out.
Okay. Fair point. And I guess one last thing, something that has been gaining traction. So I remember it was like the mailman when I was a kid, and I was like so smitten with him because he's like, gotta save your pennies. And this is like 1997. He's like, the pennies are gonna become like a rarity one day. And finally, like almost 30 years later, oh hey, they're getting rid of pennies. What do you think about keeping the penny but making the pennies worth 5 cents and then getting rid of the nickel?
Yeah, and like when we have like these critical minerals, and not that these are critical minerals, but like this is what I actually appreciate. I'll give Trump credit. Like everybody kind of agreed the penny should go away. Like very few people are defending the penny, and yet we just can't get rid of it. So I do appreciate like now an executive order I don't think does it, but maybe it moves it forward. I worry that there is so much. Everybody's just trying to score political points.
Yeah.
Biden was able to get a few bipartisan things done, like truly bipartisan things done. I worry we're going to have very few bipartisan things done, even though they're common sense. So like what you say makes sense. And like, I don't know the last time I've used a coin. It's like years since I've used a coin. So I'm indifferent. I think as some of these digital assets, people will be paying with their, Satoshi, their, parts of their Bitcoin and all of that. If you have the steel pennies from 1943, that's another good example of those wheat pennies.
Make the pennies be nickels.
Yeah, no. So that is a great common sense thing that makes sense. No pun intended. Makes sense to me.
Is that a pun?
But I just don't think like this is why people are frustrated. It's like these are common sense. Everybody agrees. Why don't we do it?
Yeah.
And because we are the parties are incentivized. Both parties are incentivized to like just call out the other parties, and it's just like I get tired of it. Even if it's a winning strategy in the short run, I personally just get tired of it. Like call people out for like dumb ideas, but like you can question a person's like judgment. Like that's a bad idea, Randy, but I can't question your motive. I can't be like, you're a bad person.
Yeah.
Because as soon as they call you a bad person, then like we can't ever reach agreement. And the problem is both parties right now call each other like they're bad people. And you really, that's a bridge that once you burn, you really can't build it. Now, I reserve the right to say like Donald Trump's doing a lot of like things that I think are very reckless and counterproductive. Like that's totally fair. And I want to believe that like that leaves room for dialogue. Now that may or may not be the case, and I may be naive for thinking that. But I do think if I just call everybody horrible, idiot, anti-American. Now Trump does it. Republicans, I mean, trust me, there's a list of people who Trump has called anti-American. So I'm not defending him. But long answer. You've asked a lot of short questions. I give you a lot of long answers. But
I love that though.
Great idea. And our system currently can't get it done.
There was this guy named Dill that I forget his first name. I don't know his first name. Military is just a lot of last names. I was deployed with him, and he loved the libertarian ideology. He just said that humans were not advanced enough to carry that out, because you have the left side that would like take advantage, you have the right side that would go in and cause all this. But I appreciate you saying like kind of coming in in that middle ground, especially as someone who's advised the Democratic president years ago, because there's a lot of people that are just like that will go to the other side and like kind of curse them and kind of like wish harm upon them, and I don't think that's a good way to be or a good way to go.
Yeah, no, we're on the same page there.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I love it. Let's talk off camera for a bit. Everyone say bye bye to Dashi. Bye bye. I appreciate you coming here. This has been great. We should do it more often.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the invite, Randy. Yeah, it's always fun to talk to you. I know we catch up offline. It's fun to, at least have these conversations so people can try to follow you and me going random places online as well.
The supernatural parks with Teddy Roosevelt. Okay, yeah, I love you. Let's end the spread. I love you all. Class dismissed.